Hey, David Brewster here from the Three for All, and this is three Buckethead licks from 2006. And definitely Buckethead is a very interesting, unusual, unique, avant-garde guitarist. And I've been a fan of his since the mid 90s, early to mid 90s. And when I first heard the album Transmutation from Praxis, I was blown away. I was like, okay, Bootsy Collins, Bernie Worrell, this rad guy named, Brain on drums, and then who is this crazy masked guitarist with a bucket on his head. And it confused me at first. I thought, what in the world is this? But then I loved it. Mostly instrumental, very weird and just random, kind of like ADD, metal or something where it's all over the place at once. There's melodic things, there's heavy things, crazy shred, funk, there's like all these different elements at play. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really like Buckethead, because you never really know what he's going to do next. He might play one of his songs, he might turn around and play Eruption, with like a severed prop hand. And when I heard, he was playing Eruption, like the tapping part with a severed prop hand, I was blown away. I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, he's literally kind of like, the movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's kind of that family's like long lost brother or something, Leatherface's brother. Because he's so weird and random. He doesn't talk. You never see his face, unless it's like some old grainy photograph from a long time ago. But, he doesn't speak. He doesn't show his face. He just kind of appears, plays all this crazy horror shred, and then disappears again. And I like that. It's a little bit of mystery, a little bit of mystique. You don't really know everything about him. And he just kind of shares his music, and that's one reason why I do respect him, because you don't have to know what he looks like. You don't have to know every detail about his life or about, his background. You just basically thrive and kind of listen to his music. And that's what it's all about. And I like that. I respect the fact that he's not an image. He's letting his music, kind of speak for him, which is really cool. I have seen Buckethead live a couple times. I saw him open for the band Galactic, and I talked about that briefly in the Buckethead chord play. And I did recently see Buckethead at the Vogue up in Indy, and I got to see him a second time, and it blew my mind, to see him again. And both times it was just a solo show. He didn't have a band with him or anything. He played with backing tracks, handed out toys, shredded his guitar, played with nunchucks, started breakdancing. He did everything you kind of expect him to do. Played a little medley from Star Wars. He pulled out all the stops for sure. But, there's a lot of mystery, not only surrounding who he is and where he comes from, but also his music. A lot of guitarists, they hear it or they see it and they're just floored because it's not normal. Nothing about Brian Carroll or Buckethead is normal. It's all a little on its side or a little twisted, a little different, and there are certain things that he plays that's very kind of common or standard ground, and then there's a bunch of stuff that he plays that's just the netherworld. It's like some crazy horror movie soundtrack gone wild, with a guitar. And I like that because there's a certain level of excitement. There's one minute he's really mellow and melodic and he plays these beautiful, melodies and lines. And then the next minute he's flying around the guitar, making it sound like R2-D2, having a fit. And that's really cool, that he can blend and blur all these different styles and ideas and sounds together. The licks I selected for this lesson came from YouTube, and it was just kind of a bootleg. I think it was from Las Vegas from 2006, and it's just a live clip of Buckethead playing with Praxis. And really cool, solo. He does, once again, everything you expect. There's a little bit of Star Wars, Pirate's Life for Me. There's all these little themes and little things that he does in the solo. But before we dive into the licks, I want to show you at least a little, kind of give you a little insight as far as where Buckethead's coming from, because he definitely has a stockpile of standard shred, licks and string skipping and stuff like that. But one thing right off the bat that catches everybody off guard is the use of augmented sounds. Now, he does use diminished, he uses chromatic. I mean, you'll catch him playing like pentatonic based, you know, Hendrix and Eddie Hazel licks too. So it's not like he, you know, he does dip into the traditional, you know, bag of tricks, but he definitely thrives on these outer edges and the outer limits, you know, of guitar. So if you're not really sure, you know, what augmented means, or if you haven't really, you know, tapped into augmented, you know, tonalities and sounds, let's look at that first, because I think that definitely for your ear, it's going to help you kind of center a little bit more as far as what you hear Buckethead play. So let's just think of like an A minor, you know, triad. You know, there's A, E, and C basically right there. Now, if we basically raise that C to C sharp, and we also raise the E to the E sharp, and we're going to basically play a, you know, raised fifth. That's going to be A augmented. So instead of this, it's going to sound like this. You know, and it has a really weird, you know, tonality. Augmented's very different. You can definitely catch Buckethead doing, you know, a very common kind of hybrid picked idea. And that's basically an augmented chord or arpeggio. And there's A. And you can move that around. And you'll definitely hear Buckethead do that, you know, where he'll take that augmented arpeggio and he'll kind of hybrid pick his way through it. You know, which is really weird, but I like it. Now, to give you another taste of augmented, let's relocate this idea to an arpeggio up here. So here's an A minor arpeggio, kind of a traditional like Yngwie shape. Right? Just a straight A minor arpeggio. So if we raise that third and we also raise the fifth, that's going to change this to this. You know, really interesting arpeggio. It's weird, it's bizarre. And definitely if you're not used to that tonality, it's going to catch your ear in a very odd way. You know, like, what in the world is that? Really interesting sound for sure. Well, definitely one thing you'll catch Buckethead do a lot is this kind of standard, almost Paul Gilbert kind of sequence. And he's using legato, but he's also speed picking. So he kind of creates this real blurry sound. And if you really watch, you know, some clips and video footage of him playing, you'll see that he uses this fingering a lot, you know, index, third, and pinky. And you'll also notice Paul Gilbert uses that fingering a lot. So this might be kind of a byproduct of, you know, working with Paul and kind of, you know, working through some of his exercises and his ideas. But so what we're going to do here is just take the top part. We're going to basically play with E Dorian is what we're going to be playing with here. And we're also going to be kind of targeting octave linking, which we've talked about that in episodes of Scales and Tails, and that's popped up in a few you know, 3-for-all lessons. You know, anything related to Paul Gilbert, you know, has kind of pinpointed these octave link scales. But what we're going to do here, we're basically just looking for that fingering. And that's not the lick. Now, what you hear Paul Gilbert do, which definitely Buckethead, you know, kind of borrowed this, I believe, from Paul. And here I'm just basically kind of, you know, working my way through this. Now, Buckethead does seem to skip over, you know, this particular shape. It seems like he just goes straight for that index, third, and pinky fingering. You know, something like that. But I kind of completed the whole scale there. Something like that. And, well, here's a clip of Buckethead kind of playing with that little fingering in that sequence. there you can see he's speed picking through that, but a little slower. And he kind of stopped, somewhere right there, and I just kind of continued down that whole pattern. I really like that idea, and it's very Paul Gilbert, inspired, and there's a little bit of Van Halen in there too. And he definitely changes that sequence around, where he does, lock into this. But then occasionally he'll reach over and grab that D. Really cool lick. The next idea is this kind of atonal, chromatic tapping idea, and he does, different versions and variations of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the left hand part first, and then I'm going to add, the tap part in. And we're going to basically tap a tritone apart, or a flat 5 apart, and that's going to give this a very odd sound. But the left hand sounds like this. Has a really strange, flavor. And then we're going to tap, basically using the index, middle, and third finger on your right hand, or your picking hand rather, in case you're left-handed. But what we're going to do now is we're going to tap a tritone higher. So we're going to basically be tapping, way up there on the 19th fret on the high E string, and that's going to be basically, a tritone away from that F note there on the 13th fret. So we're going to basically do that. And then if you maintain that same left hand pattern that we started with, and then mirror that with the taps, slowly you'll have this. Definitely hear Buckethead do a lot of different variations and versions of this. So I just kind of put it right there in the key of E, basically, loosely centered around the key of E, even though it's a very bizarre lick to try to pinpoint and say, oh yeah, that's the key of E, because it sounds like it's from, Mars or something. But really weird lick, but I like it. The last idea is one of the first Buckethead licks I actually learned how to play, and it came out of an old Guitar Player magazine. And I've seen Buckethead play, once again, different versions and variations of this. And it has this just spastic, kind of crazy, like robot or computer gone wild, kind of sound, almost like R2-D2, freaking out. And he does this quite a bit. There's different songs and, live footage that I've seen where he kind of, changes this idea around. But it looks and sounds like this. Now this is crazy. And there you can see. There's actually a lick hiding there, even though it sounds like some crazy, hyperactive thing. And once again, we're kind of mirroring a tritone apart with the tapping. Very strange. And sometimes you'll hear him kind of repeat like different parts of that, over and over. I just kind of played it straight through in the beginning. But that middle area, there's all kinds of weird things you can find kind of hiding right in the middle of that lick. going to wrap up this look at some ideas from Buckethead, and definitely, I mean, he's one of those players you just never know, what he's going to do. And a lot of his riffs and ideas and melodies, because he does play melodically, even though sometimes he just sounds like a crazy, computer gone wild. And you're just as likely to hear him play some sweet little, theme from a Disney movie, and then he might turn around and play something like this. Just these just crazy, terrifying, sounds, and it almost sounds like leftover music from a horror film, Hitchcock or John Carpenter or something like that. And I like that. And I do know that, Buckethead's admitted that he gets inspiration from some very strange, places. Monster movies and toys and just random, things that he comes across. And that's inspiring because it's so different. It's not normal. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I really like and respect him, because he's not a normal guitar player. He's not sitting around playing blues licks. He's playing very avant-garde, very complicated and demanding things. So leave some feedback and some comments. Let me know if you got anything from this lesson. And I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.